In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we're going to talk to Sue from RoadRunners. We're going to talk about how environmental policy and how sustainability impacts companies. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to our new episode of HR Visionaries. I'm looking forward to my guest today. Sue, thanks a lot for taking the time.
Oh, no, thank you, Benjamin, for having me.
Sue, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you?
Good question. I think I ask myself that every morning. So a little bit about myself. I am here in the U.S. I have been practicing human resources for about 25 years. I have both U.S. experience and international experience. From a personal standpoint, I have a husband of 23 years, going on 24 years, and we have an 18-year-old daughter who's a senior in high school, and we're going through the change of looking at colleges and planning for her to leave us in August of 2024. So big life change coming up for me.
Well, and a bit of career planning then as well, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. She wants to be a teacher. She's known from a very young age that she's wanted to be a teacher. So I think that has set her on a path where she wants to be certified as a K through 4 and a special education teacher. She's always had a lot of patience, and she really comes from a place of kindness when it comes to helping others learn. So I think she has a good future from a teaching perspective.
Cool. So, can you tell us a bit more? Why do you like the field of HR?
Oh, that's a great question, and it was interesting because we just had some projects that we're working on at work, and I had to help educate individuals on certain rules and regulations of why certain things are the way that they are. And I referred to myself as an HR nerd, and I was like, I love this stuff, and I can talk for hours about this stuff as well. Um, so I think I like it because it is a nice blend of um, you know, it's a nice blend of flexibility, but also it has a nature of structure and consistency to it. So I find that as a personality, I tend to go to where I have wiggle room. And from an HR perspective, you have that. You have hard and fast rules and laws and regulations that you have to follow. And then you have the opportunity to be flexible with how you approach them, how you structure your organization, the culture that you have. So I like the mix between the two. I also think from an HR perspective that you really do have an impact. You can have an impact at the success and whether a company makes it or breaks it. And you can have that in other areas, but to me, it's such a strength from a culture perspective for folks who get it and understand the human element of work. And I just love that. I'm fascinated by it. And I can turn myself into an HR nerd of talking through it.
It may not be the most objective and scientific measure, but I find it so interesting when you look at the leadership page of American high-tech companies, scale-ups, unicorns. You find the chief people officer at the very top, right? So it's not like a position that is there because you have to have someone who's getting new people on board, but it's a very key position.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think companies that understand that specifically are the ones that are the most successful. And for newer companies, newer startups, for the ones that figure out that that makes a difference, they get into that mindset very early in the process. It's not like that's second. It's what is the business doing is equally as important as the people in the business. So it definitely makes a difference in, I think, the success of a company.
So you haven't told us for which company are you working for at the moment?
Yeah. So I actually work for RoadRunner Recycling.
Mhm.
Um, And don't be fooled by the name, because a lot of folks, as soon as they hear RoadRunner Recycling, they think about a lot of trucks and a lot of drivers. But actually, we use our technology, we use artificial intelligence, and we use machine learning. And we're a software company that allows us to recycle more and actually manage waste. So I've learned a lot in my experience here. I've been here for almost, oh gosh, it's almost 3 years. So it's like a little less than 2.5, or a little more than 2.5. But I learned a lot about waste management that I never knew happened. I just used to throw my garbage out to the end of the curb and somebody would come pick it up. And what I've learned is that it's a highly inefficient, um, very outdated process where there has been a lack of innovation. And I used to be in the healthcare industry here in the United States. I spent a lot of time in healthcare. And healthcare, I always thought was very outdated and didn't have a lack of innovation until I came to the waste management industry. And I realized that their mantra is that's the way we've always done it, and that's good enough. And Roadrunner is changing that. Our focus is to use the advancements that have hit other industries and other companies, and to change the way that we focus on waste management. And what's really important is it's not just about being more efficient in how we handle our waste, but now with the focus on the environment and getting to zero net waste. To me, it's just the right thing to do, whether you believe in global warming or not. Being using your resources wisely is just, to me, the right thing to do. I don't want to be wasteful, not in my personal life and not in my professional life. So I like the fact that I work for a company that has the focus of, let's figure out how to take a very old, antiquated industry and use technology and innovation to make them better, which actually leaves the world a better place. So I love it.
Cool. Is it something that was kind of a theme of your career? So, like being in industries that are like, well, very inefficient and very, very tough to navigate. So you mentioned healthcare industry, which is like, well, full of its own challenges. It's hard to find staff for hospitals. It's hard to find caretakers. Um, so is it something that you always found interesting?
I actually, that's an interesting question, Benjamin, because now when I look back and think about it, there's always been an element of working for a company that tried to make things better. Um, you know, in my experience with healthcare, I've actually worked on both the insurance side of it and sort of the hospital side of it. I've also worked on the medical device side of it, so seeing it from different perspectives. I always just to say before, when I worked for the insurance side of it, you didn't want people to have procedures because that was expensive from an insurance side of it. When I worked on the medical device side of it, you wanted them to have more procedures because then they were using your medical devices, and that's how the company would make money. But I think the different perspectives have given me the opportunity to focus on, regardless of what side that you're in an industry, you really do and should strive for it to be efficient and effective. This whole concept of not being wasteful, to me, it reminds me of like growing up when your mom told you not to leave the water on when you're brushing your teeth, or to eat, not throw away food and those types of things. And so, yeah, absolutely, there's been an idea of working for a company that has been focused on innovating and using software to help that innovation. Both in the healthcare industries that I've worked for, the medical device industries, and now in the waste management.
So how did your career start? So what was the very very beginning of your career?
Great question. So I went to college at the University of Pittsburgh, and I was at a regional location in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. And I was going to save the world through psychology. So that is my official degree. I was going to go out and I was going to save the world and figure out how to use psychology. And I ended up working in a group home for handicapped and mentally challenged individuals, and then I worked in a group home for females who are juvenile delinquents. It was through the juvenile delinquent system. And what I liked about that position was the connection you had with the people, but also using the assessment tools, the analysis part of psychology to help people get through challenges in their life, whether it was a juvenile who committed some type of crime, or whether it was an alcoholic who needed help with getting through their addiction. And what I ended up learning was that's a great psychology use, but there really wasn't a whole big career and an opportunity. They were very underfunded. There wasn't a lot of careers in that place. The agencies were very uh, short-staffed, and it was hard for you to make a difference. So I actually took that assessment and analytical side of it, and went and found a company that used that for employers. So it was your whole industrial organized psychology background. It was this: how do we use the science behind the way people think and the way people work, and use that to strengthen companies to get more return on their investment of people. And so I started to use those analysis with hiring. So let's go out and let's figure out the personality traits that people have, and match those to the certain jobs that they have. And so I really was able to cut my teeth with different agencies, because I worked for a consulting company, and it was all psychology based. So it was all about what motivates people, why they want to do a good job, what do they like to do, what do they not like to do, and then using that to connect them to the right job. And I've turned that into just working in a human resources division and helping companies really finite and fine tune that approach, because it's fascinating to me. Like, I always use the example of I can drive. I can drive a car. I can drive good. I have never had an accident, never got a speeding ticket, knock on some wood. But you could not put me in a driving job where I have to drive 8 hours a day, even a big semi truck. I don't have the motivation. I would not do very well at that. I can do it. I don't want to do it. And that's a good example to me of what I try to do from an HR standpoint, is try to figure out the psychology behind something and the capabilities, and match them with a job. Because again, I can drive, I have the capabilities, I don't have the motivation, and I won't do a very good job of it. And I really think that's the secret, or the message that every employer is trying to unlock. How do they get the most out of the people that work for them?
Have you ever experienced a situation where somebody was good at a job, however, without great motivation?
Oh, wow, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think back of all of the people in my career that have been very good at a job. I will say yes,
Okay.
but
Okay. Yeah.
it doesn't last. Meaning, so here's my example. I know that I have had people in my career who have been able to do something for a short period of time because it's a necessity, meaning I need to pay the rent. I need to pay my car payment. I need to pay off my student loans. I can do this for a short period of time, even though this isn't the job that I like. So there you can. It's just you're not going to get necessarily the longevity, and you're going to start seeing eventually that their performance is going to decline. And I think I think we all can do something for 30 seconds, or 10 minutes or 6 months, whatever it is. But it's just like saving money or losing weight or being healthy. You can do it for a short period of time. It's just is not something that you can do it for a long period of time. I believe that when you find somebody who's motivated by the job or the company, that unleashes the potential for them to do so much more and so much better than if they're in something that they don't like or they don't agree with.
Okay, I must admit my question was flawed, given I didn't specify. Of course, I wanted to trigger a resounding no. But yeah, I totally agree. I think people can, well, to pay the mortgage, they can do a lot, and it's not lasting, it's not sustainable. But
It's not sustainable. Absolutely,
but
it's not sustainable.
like a sprint rather than a marathon.
Yeah.
You said motivation is key, and I totally agree. So that's something I also experience, and therefore, well, my resounding no is well, to for have I ever seen anyone sustainably I'm not sure that's a word. Have I ever seen anyone with a sustainable performance that wasn't motivated? No, I think it's
No,
just not possible.
no.
How do you think great interviewers find out about a candidate's motivation?
This is really good. I I have such admiration for people who interview day in and day out and day in and out. But at the same
Well,
time,
they're normally cookies, right? So.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I um I also believe that interviewing is one of those skills that people believe that they're always good at, and everyone thinks they're really good at it. And that's not the case. And so having the opportunity, and I'll give you experience in my career when I worked in consulting, we actually did interview for other companies. And literally, I would interview 8, 9, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so I think at one point in time, I counted up and it was like over 1,500 interviews in like a 6-month period or something because of how much we would interview. That to me is cutting your teeth on interviewing and really getting a good understanding of it. The hard part with interviewing is, you know, again, just like you can do something for a short period of time, you can also say that you're willing to do something and you can manage it. So with interviews, your goal is to get to good examples of times where they've done something and have maintained that or sustained it. So when I ask a question about dealing with a difficult customer, I don't want the first example. I want to keep asking for the third and the fourth and the fifth example so that I have a really good understanding of how you manage through those scenarios. So I think a good way with interviewing is you can't just go with the first thing they say. You have to ask a lot of follow-up questions. And first and foremost, you have to be able to put them at ease because you want them to be their true self when they're sitting across from you. So I usually start out my interviews with saying, I know that this is you evaluating my company just as much as I'm evaluating you. And I want to make sure that there's a match between what you're good at and what you want and what I need from this job. So let's not think about you're trying to compete against other people. Let's try to think about finding a match. And so I try to do that to put them at ease because I don't ever want to put somebody in a job that they're not going to be good at or that they're not going to love. And when I reframe that interview, I think it puts them at ease and they start to understand, I really shouldn't take this job if it's not what I think it is, or I really should be questioning what type of company I'm going to work for. I want them to realize that this is a two-way street here and we're both in the same scenario assessing each other. And it helps take off the pressure of you don't have to fit into what I'm trying to create. I want it to be a match. And so I think by doing that and really making sure that you're asking those follow-up questions and evaluating it against your standards. One of the big mistakes I see in interviews, Benjamin, is where they compare what they said, that what the candidate said as the standard. So for example, an initiative, every time I ask about initiative, so when did you go out of your way to help a coworker? Or when did you go out of your way to take on additional responsibility? Sometimes I get an example back like, well, my manager wanted me to do X, but I ended up doing Y. That's unnecessary initiative.
Yeah.
That is your manager asking you to do something and you went a little bit above it. That's not initiative. And so I think what a beginning interviewer does is they look at that and go, oh, okay, that's a good example. No, let's actually go back to defining what we were trying to evaluate. Because when you're interviewing, you can get caught up in, well, that's a great example. They did a little bit more, and I would love it if somebody did a little bit more in my job of what people were asked. So you have to be very firm in comparing it back to what you're expecting and what the question was about, not turn it into sort of the baseline is what they gave you, and from there is above and beyond or good enough. And I think that's what happens because people give good answers, but they're not necessarily answering the question that I asked.
Well, I always found in every job interview I had the pleasure to be part in, it sometimes a bit weird when those people who consider themselves, as you said, as very good interviewers, and then will ask something, and well, the interviewee is well. Is great in answering that, and then jump to the next point, jump to the next point, jump to the next point, and then well, try to find something where you are like, gotcha. So to find
Yeah.
that gotcha point, and you well didn't find out anything about the person because you jumped from topic to topic, while the interviewee was very eager to talk about stuff, and to give you food for thought, give you some ammunition to evaluate. However, then you ended up with like, okay, but in the end we found something he or she wasn't great at, and
Yeah.
okay, so what's the purpose of that conversation then?
Yeah, yeah, and it's sort of, I think that fallacy is called the all or nothing fallacy, or the error, or the bias. I don't know if we're going with fallacy, bias, or error now. But you're absolutely right. When we used to run, we call them debrief sessions. So when you would have multiple interviewers and you would talk about what you evaluated, it surprised me sometimes how you could have a 45-minute conversation and so much is great, and then there's that one thing, and that person just sticks on that one thing. It may not even be related
Mhm.
to the job, and it could have been just a scenario that was just this outlier in that person's career, or something, and that's what you focus it on. It's to me fascinating when you peel back the layers, because we're all people and it's just human behavior. But it does impact the way we evaluate and assess. And if you don't know those things, if you don't have the mixture of the art and the science of what makes people function well, you miss on it. You miss, and you end up not hiring people that you could have, that would have made a difference. Or in my case, sometimes the equally opposite is you hire people that you shouldn't have hired, and then they become a
Mhm.
problem, and they're much more difficult now because you have them, and it's harder to get them out of the organization.
And indeed, so I think that's also something that one always has to, well, keep in mind, that obviously the wrong hiring decision is very costly,
Very costly.
very well disturbs the operations within the company. So a no can sometimes be a great value there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think we've finally gotten to a point in what I see where a lot of people do realize that hiring makes a difference,
Mhm.
and that they need to spend time and energy in making sure that they have a very crisp and focused hiring process, because it can make a difference. And certain things, like, again, I love education, and if people having an education, to me, is very, it has an indication of how they're going to, how successful they're being. But I've also had the situation where I've had people that have gone to Ivy League schools and really struggle with leadership, or really struggle with something else. So you can't necessarily hang your hat on, oh well, they went to this Ivy League school, they have this degree, or they've worked at this company. I think a lot of people here in the US say, you've worked for Google, you could work anywhere. I don't necessarily buy into that, because I
Mhm.
do think that there's a right place and a right position and a right time. And you, as a company, need to be able to define what that is and what you're looking for, so that you can help select the person that will meet that. Because how they were in Google doesn't mean they'll be successful unless you can take everything in Google and reproduce it in your company.
And do you
And in
think it's
most times you can't.
true? And do you think that's also some kind of a trend that, um, well, several years ago, skills were like the only thing that mattered, and well, it was like, okay, well, somebody who's really capable will fit in every kind of organization. While now successful companies focus on, hey, does the person have the right amount of necessary skills, and then at the same time fits the organization very well, that he or she can well acquire the skills he or she may be lacking.
Yeah. I think it's obviously, to me, it's a continuum, and I have
Mhm.
seen the continuum over my course, where we focus a lot on this skill-based interviewing, or we focus a lot, which I'll call the personality or the motivation side of it. I can also tell you at the same side, when I think about all of the performance discussions and conversations I've had in my career, the performance improvement plans, the ones that are the most difficult are always about the skill, the soft skill, the personality, the motivation side of it. Those are the ones that they're the hardest to identify. They're the hardest to give the feedback to. They're the hardest to change, because a lot of those things are, personality wise. I like structure. I don't like structure. I like detail. I don't like detail, those types of things. And we tend to revert back to our core when we're under stress. So if I'm struggling in that aspect, it really is a habit that I have to change, because when I get stressed, I'm going to revert back to what I know, which is probably the reason I'm on the performance plan to begin with. It's easy for us to know whether somebody has a skill, whether you can, do some type of engineering software, like you can program in, I would speak some language, but I'm probably going to mess up the engineering language, and my engineering technology folks are going to be like, Sue, we didn't educate you on that.
Let's call it Java.
Yeah, like Java. If I can code in Java, that's very easy for me to see. I can test it. I can view it. The problem is there's not many companies here where I just code in Java and that's all I do. I have to interact with product managers. I have to interact with product owners. I have to interact with other engineers. I have to interact with, finance people who are giving them money to do the things that I need to do. So I think what we forget is it's easy for us to evaluate the skill. Do they have the skill or not? But there's a whole other side of that. And to me, that's the behavior. So I actually look at behavior. I look at performance as part of its results, and the results is the skill. Can I actually program in Java? The behavior side of it is, can I actually program in Java and get along with all the people I need to get along with? Can I actually adjust and be flexible when my product owner comes and tells me, well, the story has changed and I need you to do this. And it was that, but now it's this. That's most of where I see performance issues, is in the behavioral side of it. But we focus so much on the skill side of it in looking at resumes, checking off checklists. Do they have education? Do they have 5 years of experience? Do they have this skill set? We need to focus a little bit more on the behavioral side of it and actually making sure that they can balance that. Because again, until we find a job where you do nothing but that one task or that one thing by yourself in a vacuum, you really have to start being able to communicate. You have to be able to be flexible. You have to be able to be dependable, reliable, all of those things that are the behavior side of it, not just the skill side of it. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Very, very much so. And I'm wondering, do you think interviewing has become easier in the recent years, because people, in particular, very well qualified people, can be a bit more open, can be a bit more honest and transparent about stuff they are willing to do, stuff they are capable to do, but also stuff they probably can't do. So I know it's a bit of a controversial question perhaps, but I remember like back in like 10 years ago, people told you in an interview, well, I can basically walk on water. I can do everything.
Yeah.
So just hire me and all will be fine. Well, nowadays it's, as you said, a bit more like, hey, we both are evaluating our opposite. You are going to evaluate whether we are a great company you want to work for. We're going to evaluate whether you are a great fit.
I'm going to kind of spin that a little bit differently, in the sense of, I think interviewing is actually a lot harder nowadays than where it was from a interviewer's perspective, because you have so many resources available to the interviewee, meaning they can go out to Glassdoor and Indeed and get reviews on how the interview questions were asked. And again, I don't want to have an interview question where I stump you. I really want to have the authentic you show up, so that we can have an authentic conversation about whether there's a match between your skill set and behavior and my job that I have offering. But I still believe that people think that there's so much going against me and I have to get this job, or I want to work at this job, that they don't necessarily put all of that out there to share. I think I do now because of my age and experience. I'm very much like, I don't want to work at a company that I know that I'm not going to get up for and work for. I can't. I just can't pretend that long anymore, and I don't have time to pretend. But when you're starting out in your career, you're still like, hey, I don't know what I'm good at yet, and I don't know the environment that I'm going to work at. So you do the research, and you go to Chat GPT and they write their resume for you. I actually somebody told me that you can actually put in the job description and then your resume, and it will write your resume to fit that job description. So the job of being an interviewer is actually turned into a detective in a lot of sense. Like, I need to figure out how things are connected and how they work, because you can't necessarily trust the resume. You can't necessarily trust some of the examples, because they might say, hey, I picked that example up based on a review, and I knew you were going to ask that question, and I just said the exact same thing that the last person said. So I wish that it would be more to the point where interviewers would come in and say, yes, it is a match and I try to do it, but there's still a large group of people who they need a job and they just need the experience. And if they could just get their foot in the door, they're gonna get that. So until that goes away, I think you still have it's still very difficult to be an interviewer and make sure that you're getting the authentic responses that you should, because there's so much access to information and resources where you can put a front on in an interview.
I totally agree. I think it's well, it's become indeed harder, given, well, everything is much more transparent now. Not necessarily like right information, but also like myth floating around, and stuff. Okay, that people kind of like hide under a blanket of, or don't show their real faces because they have heard from somebody who has heard whatever. Which
Not to
makes
do
stuff
it.
so much exactly right.
Yeah. And so they approach the interview that way because their end goal is to get a job, not realizing that once you have the job, you then have to do it. And that's where the rubber hits the road. And that's the hard part. And a lot of people think just getting the interview and getting the job is the hard part. No, actually showing up for work 5 days a week is the hard part.
What's your favorite interview question?
Oh my goodness, my favorite interview. You know what? I'm trying to think of my favorite interview question. I think, I don't know if I have a favorite one, but I always have one that I think helps put people at ease, and I use it in the sense of, like I'll say, give me an example of where you were really able to exceed expectations. So give me an example where you felt you exceeded expectations. And then I always kind of, say, well, now I'm going to put you in a tough spot, because now I'm going to actually do what most people think you don't do in an interview, is I'm going to actually have you give me an example where you had to get feedback and show me when you were at a time where you weren't your best. And so I love that question where I ask people about, when was a time that you wish you could have done better? Or when was a time that you got feedback? Or what was the last feedback that you got? But you have to put them at ease first. Otherwise, you're not going to get legitimate. Like, you have to be able to set the tone there. Because I think, to me, that's one of the questions that truly shows who they are. Because it's a very humbling experience to get feedback or not to do your best. And then it's even more humbling to be able to share that and say, here's why. So how I know if I've done that is if I get a good example, because sometimes people will go, ooh, I don't know. I've never really had that situation. I'm like, really? In all of your experience, even in college, you haven't ever failed a test. You haven't really thought you were going to get an A and you ended up getting a C, in all of those situations. So it gives me some insight into how much they've actually been transparent with me and showed me their authentic self. And I think it puts them at ease to say, look, I know you're human. I know you're going to do things great. And I know there's going to be areas that you're not so great. And that's okay. I want you to bring your whole self to this conversation so that we can see if there's a good match. So I usually, that question of, give me a great example and then give me a not so great example. The folks who can really take that and run with it are the folks that usually make up my final interview rounds.
Tell us more about Roadrunners, please. So it sounds like a very cool mission you guys are on to make sure, hey, it's less about wasting. And I must say, I really like the meaning of the word of the English word waste, because
Yeah.
it explains so much what it actually is. It's actually like
Yeah.
a treasure you throw away. Um,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
tell me more about what you guys do. Why did the founders come up with such an idea?
Yeah, so it's actually I love the story of the founder. So Graham Ryan is our CEO, and he is the founder, and he started the company in 2014. And he actually it was doing, I want to I'm going to call it like financial analyst, stock trading, investing, that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get the right tone or the right position to it. But what he realized was that it's a very antiquated, um, outdated industry, or inefficient industry, and there's such opportunity to do things better. And when he started to investigate it and start looking at it, he was just like, there has to be a better way to do this. We have not made any significant innovation in how we as a country deal with our waste and recycling. We actually took, about 30 years ago, the same approach to waste, so to trash, that we did to recycling. We approached it the exact same way, and then we wondered why it's not working correctly. And so his thought was, we need to make this better.
Mhm.
And there's a way that we can use technology to make it better. And the waste management industry has not focused on technology. They focused on, this is the way we've always done it, and let's keep doing it this way. And that there can't be, there's no more way efficiency. The problem with innovation and waste, and I'll get to what RoadRunner does, is there's a lot of barriers to entering this
Mhm.
market. Trucks are expensive. They're $250,000, if not more, for a garbage truck. They're highly um, unreliable. They're expensive. They break. It costs a lot to fix them. You need a lot of trucks to run them. And then the way that we handle trash is the way we do recycling. We put it all together because that's efficient. It's easy for the consumer, but it adds additional work on the back end of the process, where you have contamination. You now can't recycle what you wanted to recycle. And to make matters worse, the same people that you're trying to get to recycle are the people that get benefited by throwing more trash in landfills.
Mhm.
So if I can't if I can't recycle it, which is a pain for me as the end company, meaning the big companies, it's actually more beneficial for me to have that recycling material in my waste, because you pay me to take that trash and I get very little incentive to recycle it. So it's just not a good philosophy and a manner to do it. So what Graham started to look at is, how do we make this better? And one of the ways is what we call clean stream recycling. Instead of commingling all of your recycling and you end up putting cardboard with, a beverage container that has liquid in it, and now the contamination, you can't recycle that. So our focus was, instead of putting the work on the recycling company, let's back up and put it on the beginning of the process. So now we go to the companies and we say, let's look at your waste. Let's figure out how much you're throwing away, what should not be thrown away, and what should be recycled. And if we teach you how to sort it, we then pick it up in that single stream, and we take it exactly where it needs. So now we're not taking cardboard to glass factories and dropping off the glass and then taking the cardboard to drop off at the cardboard. We're filling up a truck with all cardboard, and we're taking all of that cardboard directly to the place who's going to use it. We're filling up all the truck with all plastic and taking it directly where we need it. And by doing that and putting that responsibility on the beginning user, or the consumer, it's making it more efficient and it's streamlining it. And we've been able to actually recycle 40 and 50% more than other companies that have tried to do this. And it's because of our approach to clean stream. The other innovation that I said about the technology is, the best way for me to describe it is, it's Uber for trash. As I mentioned before, it's very expensive for companies to hire these big trucks. Well, what
Mhm.
we found is, when you take recycling and you put it into a different container, not a big dumpster, you actually can put it in boxes aren't very heavy when you stack them up and flatten them out. So we teach them to flat the cardboard and we put it into a container that has wheels on it. And then we actually work with vendors. We call them our fleet haul vendors, and they already have trucks. What was amazing to me was in a urban city, 70% of box trucks sit empty the majority of the time. Delivery trucks, moving companies, those trucks are empty 70% of the time. So what we do is we actually partner with those companies that already have their own business and they already have their own trucks. And on every day of the week, we have an app that you go on and you pick the routes that you want to do. And we tell you when to pick it up, what it is, and where to take it. And then based on you doing that, we pay you a fee. So again, kind of like Uber, you're picking up your driver, taking them somewhere, and you're using your personal car, so you don't have to invest in a new car, and you don't have to have a separate car. And the app tells you where to start and where to go. That is exactly what we've done with recycling. So now, because of the fact that we've been doing this for, since 2014, almost 10 years, we have a mass amount of customers that are doing this, that now they go from area to area, they fill up their truck with cardboard, they take it directly to the company that's going to recycle it. We've cut out the middleman. We've cut out the expensive trucks. We've cut out the MRFs, which are the manufacturing companies that split up the recycling, which is very difficult, very time consuming, and very expensive to do. So it's fascinating. I never thought I would be this excited about waste, but it aligns much with my value of just not being wasteful and recycling. It's just better for the economy and it's better for the environment. And why would I not want to reuse something that I could reuse? Why do I want to throw it in the trash that's going to cause issues for folks down the road? So we've been able to really use that innovation and change the way that trash is handled, and most importantly, the way that we recycle.
Well, when you talk to potential candidates or applicants, is that also the way how you present your company? So, given you're very emotional, you're very engaged, you're very much well, convincing why this is the right thing to do, rather than like it's not intangible, but it's very real to people.
Yeah, we do. We actually have a lot of folks that will say that they come to us because of our focus on being environmentally savvy. Like they come to us for the focus of our mission. And the mission is what kind of attracts them, and it's the culture that maintains and retains them. But it is this idea. We have a lot of individuals who do, we have a lot of individuals who raise bees and they sell their own honey, or they have their own backyard chickens. And so
well, honey is incredibly expensive, right? So it makes a lot of sense to have your own bees.
Yes. So we have folks that have that focus on being environmentally savvy, which is, the way I'll position it. They want to do things right for the earth. And this is just a good way for them to have now their profession aligned with that as well. So we definitely attract a lot of people through our mission of, we have our new tagline, modern waste and recycling, and how to do it better. Because, I think there's this focus on, or maybe this sense of apathy that, we tried recycling, it didn't work, and there's nothing we can do about it. I think about that with glass. Glass is one of the most recyclable materials, and you have a lot of neighborhoods in the United States who are saying it's too dangerous. There's not enough use for it. We're moving to plastic. And, one of the things I've done since I've started to work here is I changed my shopping habits. I try my best not to buy things in plastic. I use my reduce recycle cup. I don't, if I go on vacation, I buy the gallons of water, not the individual bottles, because what I've learned is that plastic is one of the most used resources, and people, there's so much of it that we can't even recycle and maintain all the stuff that we need to be, because people, it's easy, it's cheap, they make more of it. So I've changed my behavior. I buy things in cans. I'd love to buy things in glass jars and bottles if I can, but a lot of, again, that whole issue. And And so we're actually going back and saying, no, you can do this and you can do it well, and you can make a difference with how you recycle. And I think I know it's catching on, and we're actually making a difference, and we're disrupting this industry, which is fascinating, because to me it will leave Earth in a better place than where we found it.
Awesome. So thank you so much for everything. It was just super cool talking to you. It's great to work for an organization that serves a very high purpose, and that makes planet better place and leave it better than you found it.
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed our conversations both before and after we started to record the podcast. So I'm definitely thinking you and I are going to connect next year and see how things are going.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sue. And thanks all of you for listening in. I think it was a very engaging, very fruitful discussion we had. I'm sure you enjoyed it as much as I did. And see you next time.